Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Before we get started tonight, I just have to say, can you pull a room or what? I am so impressed by the folks that we've been able to gather here for this conversation tonight. Some of you look familiar to me, some do not. I look forward to meeting those who don't throughout the course of the evening. My name is Braden Cleary. I'm a director at Arabella Advisors. We are a professional services firm working alongside social sector leaders to improve communities and create a more healthy, equitable, and just world. And we are pleased today to stand in partnership with BRAC. BRAC is a leading international nonprofit with a mission to empower people and communities in situations of poverty, situations of illiteracy, disease, and social injustice. BRAC designs proven and scalable solutions that equip people with the support, the skills, the confidence that they need to lift themselves out of poverty and fulfill their full potential. And so I have to admit, as I've been socializing this event with peers and colleagues over the past weeks, I've described BRAC as a global development organization, to which I've received many furrowed brows, a couple of eye rolls, until finally someone stopped me and said, Braden, BRAC is the global development organization. So, how did Arabella Advisors and the Global Development Organization become such great friends? BRAC is a client of Kiwi Partners, which is a service of Arabella Advisors that provides back office operational support to nonprofit organizations in the areas of accounting, in areas of human resources, technology, consulting. BRAC said, we're interested in learning a little bit more about Arabella. And Arabella said, we're interested in learning a little bit more about BRAC. And the rest is history. So, the reason that we come here together tonight is to talk a little bit about the conversations that we've had that are a product of that mutual curiosity that we hope to carry us forward as we all work together to continue to meet this moment in our sector. And without further ado, to get us started this evening, I'd like to introduce Mr. Nick Kristof to give us some framing on the global development and the topics we will explore tonight. Nick is a New York Times opinion writer, a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, and an Emmy winner. Nick has authored 6 books, one of which is Chasing Hope, which some of you actually received for being the first people in the room tonight, so good on you. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome and pass the mic to Mr. Nick Kristof.
Thank you so much, Braden, and thanks for all that you and your colleagues at Arabella do to encourage people to donate in more effective ways. As somebody who writes a lot about human rights, I'd also like to apologize on behalf of the United States and New York for this weather, this humidity. You thought I was going to apologize for something else. I've noticed how all world leaders are flattering President Trump, but I'm not going to thank President Trump for bringing us all together, although he may play some role in an inadvertent way. I just wanted to, just briefly frame the situation as I see it and offer some provocations for the next the next group to maybe think about and to empower the conversation later in the panel. And obviously a starting point is just what a difficult international environment it is right now. And that is not just because of what has happened to USAID, but also, we've created a permission structure in which Britain and France and other countries have also been cutting aid. And, I've just made my 3rd trip to sub-Saharan Africa this year, post-USAID, and it's just wrenching when you go home to home and find child after child dying unnecessarily. It's brutal. And we tend to measure these crises by mortality, but what I see is that the crisis just goes way, way beyond that. And one thing, that just really kind of broke my heart was I met a teenage girl who had just been married off to an older guy because her family basically couldn't afford to feed her, and the family got a $140 bride price from her new husband, and so she wept, but her dad said, look, we don't have any alternative. And so she is now married, dropped out of school and married. And so then I drove over to her parents' house to talk to the dad and ask why he had done this. And he fully acknowledged it. He said, look, we didn't want to, but we were struggling, and this was the only way we could pay our bills and buy food. And then he pointed to his younger daughter, who, depending on her document, it just had a year of birth, not date of birth, so she's either 12 or 13. And he said he may have to marry her off as well. This little girl, 12 or 13 years old. And, I just think that decades and decades from now, we will be dealing with the aftermath of this. And that's people who were pulled out of school to be married off as young girls in 2025. And it's kids who couldn't get adequate nutrition in 2025 and who will be stunted for the rest of their lives physically, which is, of course, is what we can measure, but also cognitively, which is harder to measure. And so certainly that's one thing that we have to all think about. And I think that indeed a lot of the conversations this week in New York have been about that. But I think there's also a harder conversation that we have to have, and that is how we, as Bleeding Heart humanitarians, lost so much of the world. And the truth is that in the United States, aid has been slashed, and an awful lot of people are cheering. And in Britain, you have a Labour government that slashed aid. And you don't see Brits running out in the streets and saying this is awful. And I think that we were often so focused on doing the work that we did not adequately focus on getting the message across and building a constituency. And, I was talking to the head of one aid organization this morning, and that person said, look, we kind of did this to ourselves. That's a little harsh, but I think it's worth reflecting on how we lost the public in so much of the world and how we remedy that. And then I think the other question that I'm thinking about is, where we go from here and how we can, where there are fewer resources, how we can deliver them more effectively and get more bang for the buck, and how we can prioritize better. And the truth is that anybody who has been in the field has seen plenty of aid projects that have not been terribly effective and that haven't been used in ways that would maximize that investment. And I think we've got to do better. And, I've got to say that BRAC is one of the organizations that I've most admired around the world for many years, partly because it's incredibly effective, not only in Bangladesh, but in other countries. And it manages to be highly effective with particularly disenfranchised populations at a very low cost of operation. And we can talk more about that. But right now, let me introduce the next round of speakers. I'd like to introduce Kristen Molyneux, the president of Lever for Change, and which is a sort of nonprofit outgrowth of the MacArthur Foundation. And then also Asif Saleh, who is the executive director of BRAC and is very much overseeing this incredibly effective organization in so many countries around the world. So Kristen and Asif, the floor is yours.
This is a little like being on a boat.
It's kind of like a wave.
Oh, wow. Okay, all right. First of all, let me just thank you for being such a torchlight for international development. I've been reading you for such a long time, and I'm used to that small picture that you have in New York Times. So seeing you live in person has been quite a, I had one of those fanboy moments, but essentially I think there are, even as you said, that when at this time when international aid is not popular at all, you're still arguing for that core element of humanity and humanitarianism and why it's important. So I think on behalf of the sector, just want to thank you for the years of work and championing this cause, because it's so important and we don't have a lot of people like that. And we need to talk about why we don't have enough champions, but I think but thank you again for our side. But yeah, I think, yeah, we deserve a big round of applause. Yeah. So, okay, we are gonna do a bit of a fireside chat. So it's a conversation between Kristen and me. So in terms of, let me ask you the first question, I guess, that's all right. Because I think one of the things that Labor for Change is known for, that, you started this whole kind of big bet and taking on a big solution. I mean, I think my question would be that how has your kind of model has evolved over time, and also how you looked at partnerships to scale solutions in general?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here this evening. It's a real honor. And yeah, I feel like of all the people who've had successful models, I feel like this might be the question for you. But so with Lever for Change, we started with this notion at the MacArthur Foundation that was, what if we flipped philanthropy on its head a bit? Rather than our program officers going out and deciding what strategy to do and creating a strategy and then going out and asking organizations to fit into that strategy and have the kind of impact that we thought was important on the ground, what if we said, let's not do that. Let's instead ask organizations to tell us what are the most critical, pressing problems in their communities, in their regions, in their countries, and what are the solutions that are effective, that are solving those problems or working to have impact on those problems. And so it was a real shift, I think, in terms of the organization and how we were thinking about that. So that was what led to the very first round of our $100 million grant competition called 100 and Change. And when we ran that challenge, we thought this is going to be crazy and everybody's going to have a lot to say about it and it could fail spectacularly. And but we tried it. And what we ended up finding out was not only did we have success in surfacing a huge amount of amazing organizations all over the world doing really impactful things, but we also found that we had all these funders coming to us and saying, what did you find? What did you get? What is bubbling up to the top in doing this process? And so that was what led to the beginning of Lever for Change. It was, how do we get big amounts of capital out into the world, multi-year grants, but where we're asking people to tell us the problem and the solution, and we're not overly defining it and overly strategizing it and overly creating the box that organizations needed to fit into. So that was where our model started. And as we ran multiple open calls and received lots of applications, we talked to lots of funders who also said, this is great, but we want to give more than a single grant. So what are other models where we could build a field, for example? And so we evolved our model to moving from giving single grants from a funder who wanted to work with us to giving multiple grants of at least $1 million each. Again, life-changing grants for many organizations. The US data says that the average grant size is somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. And that just keeps organizations in these cycles of poverty where they can't innovate, they can't hire, they can't build sustainable organizations to really have impact. So we were like, $1 million grants, general operating support. Let's do this, and people again called us crazy, but we've had enormous success with getting grants out the door and supporting organizations to be more nimble and agile. And I think for us, partnership there's lots of ways to partner and there's lots of different on-ramps. And for Lever for Change, it can be donors coming together and collectively deciding to do something together. But it's also taking advantage of what other funders have already done. I think one of the things that, and I will say I'm guilty of this. I used to be a program staff person at the MacArthur Foundation. I did all the grant making things that we all do and manage as foundation staff people. But at the end of the day, it's constraining organizations. And being able to provide these multi-year larger grants to allow organizations to partner in new ways with organizations on the ground and funders to partner in new ways is really, I think, what is going to get us to the next level. We have to stop over-engineering everything and let organizations take the reins and move forward.
No, I think that's essentially, thank you for that. I mean, essentially that's how also, I mean, it seems like the industry is starting to move as well in many ways.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would like to hear from you. I mean, when you're thinking about your work on the ground as BRAC, I mean, you have obviously one of the largest brands in international development in terms of the work that you do and the success that you've had. But how do you see collaboration, both from the perspective of how is it that funders are coming to you and asking to collaborate either with one another or with you, and how are you thinking about partnerships on the ground?
Thank you. And sorry, I lost my voice a little bit this week, so voice sounds a bit husky. I'm not used to talking so much. I'm more used to doing. But essentially, I think, I mean, just going back on, I don't think we are a very well-known brand, honestly speaking, because probably in the development sector.
Maybe in the development sector.
Yeah, but I mean, I still have.
I read about you guys in graduate school. Come on.
That's unless, but when I still get that question, that are you, is Dr. Yunus the founder? Are you part of Grameen? So I do hear that question quite a bit because people think that, oh, it's an organization from Bangladesh, so how many organizations from Bangladesh can be? But I think that fundamentally, I think one of the key things I would say that I'll maybe give you one example of what we look at as a holy grail of how things panned out for one of our flagship programs, which is the ultra-poor graduation model. And Nick has written about it. But if you kind of now follow the trajectory of how it expanded from a small pilot in Bangladesh, which originally started with that first question that where our BRAC's founder asked that, why is a certain population of our microfinance clients are not being able to use the money and they are defaulting? So he commissioned the research. And then we found that consistently across the country, there's a group who are so poor, who are so invisible, that even if you give microfinance to them, they cannot do anything with it. All of their expenses go just to pay for their daily subsistence. Now, so then the whole idea that microfinance is not going to solve everybody's problem came about. So then this is for the first time this whole kind of phrase ultra poor was coined at that time. This is a specific set of population which would require a far more hand-holding than just an average microfinance client. So that required a lot of kind of design thinking around how do you cater for this group of people who just cannot, it's just asset transfer is not enough for them because they're completely invisible. So there actually needs to build up agency amongst them, confidence among them. So this over an iterative process, a 2-year program was designed, which started with an asset transfer, identification of who's going to get the asset, then leading to essentially an asset transfer, then identification of what are the criteria that need to be checked off for them to graduate from ultra poverty to the next level, so that they can actually then on their own, they don't need that hand holding anymore. And this whole sort of definition of poverty, that poverty is not just poverty of income, it's actually a multi-dimensional angle, that all came from there. So then the pilot worked, and then we scaled up in Bangladesh. Then in 2006, Ford Foundation came in and basically said that this is a great model, but does it work outside Bangladesh? We want to test this out. And then we took it to 6 countries through various other implementing organizations, and then a randomized control trial was also paired with that let's identify whether this actually works in other contexts as well. And that's in 2015, the results of the UPG, ultra-poor graduation model, came out. This research was done by Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee. You are familiar with their work. They won their Nobel Prize for this and in economics. And when they basically came up with the results saying that this is actually works in other contexts as well, then there was a lot of interest that came in, right? And then how does it work? Can it work in other ways? Can others scale it? So then we set up a dedicated group of people who actually was working with governments, other organizations to take this learning from this model to incorporate in their system. So now this is being replicated in 46 countries. This whole initiative was set up by the Audacious Grant. Greg Chen, who's here, who's running this model as well, initiative as well. And essentially, now this is, and largest scale up is actually in India and being done by, excuse me, by the Indian government and the state government. So in a sense, you see the trajectory of how a local led model approach with a long-term view paired with independent research, catalytic funding coming in, and then a group of funders coming in to grow that model. So that's, to me, is the holy grail. So I think we need all of these to come together in different partnerships, but we don't have enough time. For climate issues like climate, we need to do it much faster.
No, you're fine. Do you want some water?
So maybe I'll ask you my question then. So that way I can get some breather. But in a sense, I think you are doing a bit of a different, creating a different type of funding environment. And what does it look like with that sustains impact while allowing for growth as well at the same time?
So, in the last, Letter for Change was formed 6 years ago now. And at the outset, we said, okay, we're going to try and unlock $1 billion in capital. In 5 years, we unlocked $2.5 billion in capital with a staff of 23 people. On comparison, and are any of my MacArthur colleagues in the room? I'm not to call them out, but MacArthur Foundation gives $250 million a year with a staff of over 200 people. And so, when I look at that, I just say to myself, we have to do better as foundations, as individual funders, as donors of all stripes and sizes, and what we bring to bear in terms of our resources and the ways in which we can get money to the ground to the organizations and the people who need it the most. And for me, I think, you talked about catalytic capital, right? The work that you were doing, the innovations that you were testing, I'm probably keeping it too close to this thing. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. But the resources that you were putting into being able to test these models, you had that catalytic capital. You didn't have somebody standing over your shoulder saying, you got to do it this way, you got to use these metrics, we want to see this kind of program, which we all know is just, it's not realistic. Nobody, well, maybe some people, I think a lot of folks probably would never have predicted what has happened in the last 6 months in terms of international funding. To have organizations constrained because they have these grants that have tied them in so tightly to to a set of deliverables that either the funder wants or the foundation wants or somebody wants to see, does not allow organizations to actually meet the moment, right? It really keeps them constricted in ways that is not advantageous. It doesn't allow them to learn, to fail. We should all be celebrating failure and not looking at what it is that only works, but what has failed. And it doesn't allow them to pivot and to hire and innovate in ways that could be really, really useful for the field. It really constrains everybody. And so in my mind, we need more catalytic capital. We need more multi-year grants where organizations have some level of security to scale their team, to meet the moment, and to innovate and to learn. And so for me, it's about how do we build more funders who are willing to move money quickly, make decisions quickly, piggyback off of each other and the work that everybody else has done for due diligence. We will actively share due diligence with any funder who wants it from us. We actively tell funders all the time, you can come to us, we will give you due diligence, we will give you our pipeline. We have 10,000 organizations in a database with applications that we have the technology to sort and splice the data for any organization you might be looking for in a geography or topic area. And we have to beg people to use it because everybody wants to go off and do their own due diligence. You know, it's like this is madness. It's madness, right? So the ways in which we need to get more growth capital into the field do not match the need. We have the opportunities and we have the ways, but we're not using them. So for me, growth and sustainability means we need to get organizations on a trajectory where they are not bootstrapped every single day. They are unable to innovate and test things and fail and have the freedom to do so and the freedom to really be able to pivot and meet the moment. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, but I think one of the things, again, going back to some of the conversations that I'm hearing this week here, I mean, Nick, I know you mentioned that there has been some reflection, but honestly speaking, the method, I mean, things have not changed dramatically. I don't think people are realizing, unless they go, like you said, like you visited and you realize that there is the opportunity cost of not spending each dollar wisely and effectively has suddenly gone up tremendously, right? Because we have far less, but we have to do far more. Because the complexity in this changing world has gone up a lot more. I don't see the sense of urgency that I thought I would see this time, not amongst at least the people I have met with various actors. And I think that's a problem. I think people are still thinking they can tinker around the edges and then it's gonna just go back to normal. But I think you appreciate your last week's column as well, that so vividly brought out what's happening. I mean, on one hand, there is that humanitarian crisis where, you need that immediate support for life-saving. But on the other hand, the long-term development work around poverty, around climate, around gender equality, all of those have to happen, right? So in a way, the way the silos need to be broken, the way long-term thinking that needs to come. I don't think that's quite there yet. And that's I think that's one of the things that we want to do more, that talk about how to do development differently in a way,
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think right now there's a lot of funders. I'll say this. I think there is, what we've seen anyway in the last few months is there's obviously been kind of an immediate freeze and paralysis. Everybody is trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we support the field? A lot of funders have just kind of retrenched into supporting their own grantees. We're not thinking about what else we're going to do. We recognize we cannot fill the void that is left behind from USAID and other bilaterals leaving the space. However, it doesn't mean that there's not things that can't be done to continue to push the work forward. And I think that is where we as a sector need to be able to say progress has been made and there are ways for us to continue to move that ball forward or hold the line. Where can we hold the line? We might not be able to make as much progress as we wanted, but where can we hold the line? And so I am hoping that we're starting to hear a lot more from funders. I'm excited that we're starting to hear a little bit more from funders, but what I'm not seeing yet is that convert into actual money that's going out the door yet. But I do think it's starting to happen. But to your point, I mean, I had a conversation and it was everything I could do to not fully speak my mind, but where funders were saying, yeah, we had set up a stabilization fund to support organizations within our network with small grants just to support on legal support, IT, cybersecurity, just things that people needed in the moment, communication support, what do we do about our website? How do we talk about DEI? Just things that were critical. And we were talking to a funder to say, do you want to support this fund? And they said, well, that's great, but what we really want to see nonprofits doing right now is reimagining the nonprofit sector. What is the future of the nonprofit sector going to be? And it took everything for me to not say, do you think anybody has the bleeping time to do that right now. I mean, people are living in poverty. Resources are being taken away from children. Children are dying. Mothers are dying. What are you talking about, right? But that's where so many funders are, unfortunately. And I just think we have to keep saying there are real ways to make a difference, and there are still ways to make impact, even though this is happening. And I think, again, telling that story in a way that brings people along and where they can see, I might not get a school named after me, and I might not know exactly how this $1 that I'm giving to this organization is having impact, but the organization as a whole is having this impact, and I am part of that. And I'm not going to require a lot of extra reporting for it and this, that, and the other thing and extra special attention because I gave money, but rather I recognize my contribution to the whole in this humanitarian endeavor in a way that is less about me as the funder and more about the work that really matters.
Absolutely. And as a kind of collective, we are very good at catching on these terms, right? Localization, like everybody's talking about localization, but what does it really mean? Is it about zip codes? Like now everybody's registering their office in a global south country, and then, but it's more about the approach, right? Now you might have mentioned reimagining aid. I don't know, like I'm getting like every week I'm getting an invitation about reimagining aid, and every 3 or 4 other initiatives that are happening, and they're not talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so there is now, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, this is a fundamentally, everybody wants to do their own thing, and I think that's why I appreciate Labor for Change. You're crowding in to solve one problem. I think that would be a lesson for. This is something that we also want to tell the world from our years of work, 52 years of work that we have done in Bangladesh and many other countries, as Shamar and overseas outside Bangladesh, is that it is a long-term game. We should, as organizations who are on the ground implementing, we should be seen as solving problems rather than being a vendor or subcontractor to donors, right? So then if it's a complete different mindset when you do that, because when you social entrepreneurs are going to look at problem as a whole and try to do an entire ecosystem, what will it take? You will live and breathe that problem until you solve it. So I think unless and until that mindset changes, unless we, as a sector, that we move from a fundraising-based model to a more program-driven model where we are trying to solve a specific challenge, be it climate, be it poverty, and these are very complex challenges that takes a long time to just get a traction on things. So unless all of us collectively, we have that appreciation, I don't think fundamentally things are going to be very different. So I think we need to do a lot of soul searching ourselves.
We do. I know we're running out of time, so I want to ask you, what is it that's giving you hope these days?
Yeah, honestly speaking, I think in a sense the doom and gloom we see more when I come to the West.
You're welcome.
Sorry, but I mean, you would think that people are going about doing their business every day, right? I mean, I was, one of the high points of this week was seeing the Barbados Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, and she was saying something which I thought was very important, that resilience is in our culture, right? So as a result, resilience leads to action, and action leads to hope. I think that's very important, because unless you're doing things on the ground, and people are, yes, there are big crises that that are seeing that, but people are going about their business. They are like, okay, we have to figure out our own thing. And what gives me hope is that when I go to the field, when I see our staff doing all this work, when I see our clients, honestly speaking, still smiling, still going on, trying to figure their life out, in spite of everything that is going wrong, then you have renewed appreciation about not only what we do, but at the same time that, there is a lot of hope out there. So I think you just need to focus on things that are within your control, and also look at the people who are fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
And the same question to you as well for me.
So I would say I'm going to steal, I was at a dinner the other night with Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, and I'm going to steal what she said, which is she's neither feeling hopeful nor pessimistic, but she's feeling determined. And I feel like that's where I am. I am determined to find more ways that we can unlock capital so that we can get it into the hands of people who are really working on the ground to have impact. And that is my goal. I feel like that's my role to play in this. And I'm feeling more determined than ever that that money is out there. We all know that money is out there. And finding more ways that we at Lever for Change can create opportunities for partnerships, for collaboratives, for ways to move that money quickly and efficiently. That's what I'm determined to do.
Well, amen to that. And the rest of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, determined. Thank you both. I'd like to take a pause in the conversation, invite any questions that you might have for Kristen or Asif about anything you've heard in our fireside chat. Raise a hand and I'll come back to you. Yes.
Thanks for coming. Steve Mark from Microloan Foundation. We were talking a little bit earlier about collaboration and working together, and I'd be very curious from either or both of your perspectives, what you're seeing that's hopeful in the collaboration space. It's always a great idea, but sometimes it gets difficult to actually get out of our own way to actually work together. Thank you.
I'm definitely seeing a lot more funders who are interested in working together. And I think working together in ways that are not as cumbersome as they've been in the past. So years ago, I put together a funder initiative, to try and unlock about $10 to $12 million a year for girls' secondary education. And it took, it was a year or more of just getting the donors to the table in agreement on what we were going to fund and what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And I think that what I'm seeing now is more people coming to the table in different ways and saying, here's what I can contribute, and I don't need to be we don't need to overly construct this, but like we all agree journalism is important, and let's get money out there for journalism and find better and faster ways to do that. So that's giving me a little bit of hope as well, that there's that desire for that collaboration, but it's not, again, I think we're really good at overly complicating and making things really technocratic and cumbersome. And I think for a lot of the new funders that are coming online now, they're not starting foundations, they're not staffing up. They're looking to make a difference with their money, and they're looking to find ways to put it to use with other funders in ways that can move that money out without having to create this whole infrastructure. And I think that's hopeful. It's also scary because organizations don't know where to go necessarily to find that money, but I think there's opportunities there that we can harness to reimagine the landscape of the nonprofit sector.
Well, I just want to add. I mean, I think for me, well, I think there is an appreciation or admission that there is something wrong in the way, as Nick was saying, not only in terms of how all of us collectively did a poor job in terms of selling to our own internal domestic audience, be it in Bangladesh or be it in US, to the urban chattering class. I think in a sense that's one aspect of communication and how aid is mutually beneficial, or the support for both countries. I think we need a new narrative, but there is that appreciation that I think, but the other thing from very specifically to your question about collaboration, and I think there, again, I would agree that there is a bit more openness because I think everybody's trying to figure out that how to kind of get this right going forward, right? So essentially, the sector was ripe for disruption, but it happened very abruptly, and nobody was prepared for it. But now that it's happened, it's really important to really have that honest conversation. There has been a lot of wasting in this. There has been a lot of duplication. there has been not a lot of efficiency. And I think that unless that honest reflection is done, which I'm seeing in some aspects of this reimagining of conversation, but I think the new 2.0 model is not going to come very differently. So I think, so in a way, those conversations have started. So in a collaborative way, that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for both your comments. My name is Julia Fish, I'm with Glenmead, and Kristen, I was hoping you could speak to some of the dynamics we're seeing with some of the, even Mackenzie Scott grant recipients, where sometimes there's this, they're elated to receive these Mackenzie Scott grants, but it's also sometimes challenging the messaging out and developing their donor base once they've received these multi-year grants, because there can be a perception that, if we message out that we're an awardee of Mackenzie Scott, we don't need any additional funds. The donors may think they may not need additional funds for years to come, or focus their attention elsewhere, just knowing that the grant recipient is quote unquote set. So I'm wondering if you see that dynamic at all in your world, and what maybe nonprofits can do to better communicate the privilege of receiving a multi-year grant while also still cultivating their donor base for long-term sustainability.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think some organizations have really done this well. And actually, Breck, you probably have some experience with this as well, and can probably speak to this more eloquently than I can. But I think we've seen organizations take lots of different tacks with this. Part of it is we've seen organizations who have said this is going to cover our operating costs for a certain amount of time. I think it's about getting clear internally. How are we using this money? For what purpose? What is it going to? What does it provide for us in terms of stability? And then how do we message that to our funders in a way that also says, here is how your work continues to catalyze this really fantastic opportunity that we have. And also saying to your funders, it is because of you that we are at the point that we received this grant, right? It's because of the work that you did to help us build this organization, to put in that initial risk capital. And I got a lot to say about philanthropists thinking they're giving risk capital, because I got a lot to say. But but I think it's about how you as a team are really strategic in messaging that. And organizations have had great success with that, right? But organizations who kind of, I think, don't take the time to figure out how we really want to message it and how are we going to use that money internally in the ways in which we are going to show how your additional capital, even with this, is going to continue to allow our team to grow in new ways, continue to innovate, all of the things. I think that's where organizations run into problem. It doesn't mean that the funding cliff isn't real. It is real. There's only so many funders out there that are giving these large grants. I wish it was more. If I had my way, people would be getting, when they say, well, what could we do? 20-year grants, just do it. There is no, this isn't that complicated, right? It's we are putting the constraints on ourselves and creating the messaging of risk. I can't tell you how many organizations come up to me and say, we just don't have the absorptive capacity for $1 million grant. I said, are you telling me right now you don't know what you would do with $1 million? And everyone said, oh, no, we would. But we have internalized that message. Funders have been saying it, organizations have internalized it, and it's just kind of recreating this cycle that makes, in my mind, zero sense, because there's guys with PowerPoints and one person getting millions of dollars from VC because they have a great idea. They've got absorptive capacity, but an organization that's been working on the ground for 10 years doing really impactful work doesn't, because they've never received a grant that big before. So I've got a lot to say on the whole concept of risk. But I would say for any organization, I would love to hear your comments. I think when you get a large grant, it's really about taking that moment in time. I would say treat it like a lottery, right? You're not gonna probably go out and tell all your friends and family, I just won $300 million in the lottery, right? You're gonna what is the work we need to do internally to make choices about how this money is going to be used wisely and in a smart way, and then think about how we then go to our donors and message it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a sense for us, it's I don't think this has been a problem for us, because in a way all our sort of I mean, depending on how, you're absolutely right, how you frame it. Like essentially when we are talking about this ultra poor graduation model and scaling it up across the world through governments and others, and that's from one of the funds that we got for the audacious one. But essentially, I think there is far more need to what we're trying to do about SDG 1, and Shamran will talk about that, I'm sure, in the next session. But then there are other times we basically are using that as endowment for our organization. So depending on the need, and all of our work, as I was saying, has always been very vision and need driven, that this is what we want to see change and this is what we want to do. And so then we look for money rather than starting with money coming, where the money is going to come from and do we design that. So that is probably our conversation with the donors are very different as a result. And in Bangladesh, for example, we also have alternative diversified resources of earning as well. So which also gives us a lot more independence in trying on new things, having a different type of conversation with the donors, because we have a lot of social enterprises that generates its own income as well. So yeah, that's say that. I think our time is up, so.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.